So, welcome back to the Defiant Spirit podcast. I am Dr. Baruch Halevi, also known as B, and I am your host. I'm the creator of the Defiant Spirit. So, if this is your first time, thank you for joining us. For those of you who are regulars, welcome back to, I guess, what is technically season two. I took a hiatus in the middle of, during the summer and just kind of resumed in the last couple of weeks, getting back in action after a wonderful summer of some R&R for sure. Lots of kids going lots of different directions, drop off and pickups from the airport and camps and whatnot. Ariel and my wife and I got away for a couple trips. We bought an RV during COVID. It was kind of a lifelong dream. And so we hit the mountains a few times, both with the kids and also just alone, as well as I went once or twice by myself, and just lots of good recreation, right? To recreate yourself, to vacation, to vacate the routines and the usual rhythms to get clear. And we all need that. So I am back in action with, again, I guess technically season two, though I've been doing this for a long time, but really getting clear on my work over the past couple of years in particular. Been doing the work that I have been doing for about 20, 25 years: spiritual guidance, therapy, counseling, coaching, all these kind of different crossroads coming together. And my passion has really evolved into two things, as you know, for those of you who have been with me: logotherapy, the work of Dr. Viktor Frankl, author of Man's Search for Meaning and 30 some odd other books. Um, Logos means meaning, so meaning-centered therapy, but it's more than therapy. It's a philosophy of living together now with the Enneagram, an ancient personality, psychological, spiritual assessment tool, just second to none. Really amazing tool. Bringing those two things together, and that is what the Defiant Spirit now is for me, all in the intersection of Viktor Frankl and the Enneagram. It's a space that I think I alone own. My two passions, really informed also by different spiritual traditions, but that's kind of bound up in the Enneagram. So I'm very proud of that space. I'm committed and passionate to that space and helping people like you, if you're listening, to, well, do exactly what we're going to talk about in this podcast, to find and to live your why, to have practical applications of that why. I don't want you just to kind of live in a theoretical place of knowing your why, your purpose, your vision, but translating it into action. So that's your how. So your why, your how, and then now making it happen right here, right now. Now, we're not going to get to all of that in this podcast, but as I'm kicking off this second, we'll say semester, I got a lot of kids in school right now, this second season of the Defiant Spirit, starting macro, and we'll work our way down to a lot of different hows, because I've spent the past summer working on the how of my Enneagram system, and how to utilize it, and how to integrate the why into our daily life in practical ways. So we're going to get into lots of practical hows, and down the road we'll get into lots of nows, being present moment awareness, lots of mindfulness practice. But let's start again with the why. So it really is a simple formula. I think of Henry David Thoreau, who said, I think it was in Walden or something, he said, simplify, simplify, simplify your life. And then Emerson came along afterwards and said, Thoreau probably could have gotten by with one simplify. So simplify, 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 or to say it succinctly, just simplify. And simplifying is this why, how, and now. It's a formula for better living, for meaningful living, for logos living. Ooh, that's a good term. Logos living, living with purpose. I like logos because it encapsulates meaning and purpose and true self-authenticity all in this one word, but don't fully know what the word means. So got to translate it. So logos living, why, how, now. Well, streamlining things, this why is contagious. People understand it when you talk about finding your why, which is why Simon Sinek, I think, really hit home with his book Start with Why. And ever since then, follow-up books around this power of why. It wasn't Simon's idea. Lots of people probably heard it for the first time, really expounded upon by Simon Sinek, and a great book. I really encourage you to read Start with Why, especially for the business sector. But it's an ancient idea. It's, first of all, I mean, it is ancient, but you don't have to go back to antiquity to explore it, because my teacher, Viktor Frankl, picked up on Friedrich Nietzsche's idea of he or she who has a why to live for can endure anyhow. Let me say it again. He or she who has a why to live for can endure anyhow. And Frankl paraphrased this in multiple places, I think one of which was in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. And he attributes this to, in no small measure, one of the ways he survived the Holocaust, having lost his entire family, his wife, his parents, his siblings, his unborn child, his family, his friends, his community, murdered in 4 different concentration or death camps. And Frankl not only survived, but in many ways he thrived, certainly afterwards. How? Because he had a why to live for. He talks a lot about this, finding his why, living his why, having a why that was self-transcendent, that transcended him, that was bigger than him. So he spent the remainder of his life in his ways redeeming that darkness by finding light within it and sharing it with the world. And so having a why isn't a nice idea. It's essential. It may not be essential during, average times when things are fine, but when the shit hits the fan, you better have your why. Look, I've seen it over. I've been privy to the lives of thousands of people, I guess, guiding them through what I call life's T's, tests, trials, transitions, traumas, tragedies. I've been invited into people's lives on in the deepest way, and to bear witness to what they've gone through. And I've seen one of the difference makers in people surviving or succumbing is having a why. I've shared it many times. I believe my father would still be alive if he had articulated. I think he had a why. I just don't think he could articulate it to himself. I know he couldn't, because in his final moments of life, if he could articulate his why, he wouldn't have chosen to end his life. My father took his life by suicide. And my grandmother, completed suicide. She killed herself. And so it's a very personal and poignant message to all of us, and to me, that we need our why when it hits the fan, when we are up against the ropes, when we feel like we can't go on. But we also need it when we want to do more than just survive. This isn't just about the tragedies and the traumas. I'm doing much, much more work right now with, more of an executive coach clientele, people who are trying to be proactive in their business, in their companies, and then the lives that they're living, to live their why during the average, ordinary times, during the good times, right? Can you go from what Jim Collins, another great author, wrote, from good to great? Great book, great business book. From good to great, it's not always enough to just have a good life. What about a great life? Companies he talks about in the book who weren't just good, but great. And some of this is the difference maker, the why, to know your why. I know my why. I've worked on it for a very long time, but I didn't always live it. And I felt myself drowning in some ways in my life. It was good. My life was good, up until 2015 when I was a congregational rabbi. But it wasn't great, because I was living other people's why for me, for 1,000 different reasons. I ended up in the profession, and I ended up in that context, and I don't regret it. And there were some wonderful pieces about it, but it's not fully my why. It's not my why anymore, really, at all, which is why I've kind of morphed in this other direction. My why is Frankl, and it is the Enneagram, and it's teaching in this capacity, and it's guiding people with this framework, drawing upon that great tradition that I come from, but also drawing upon other great isms and traditions. And I could feel myself at some of those life's crossroads, not having the fuel to get through them, not having the desire, the drive. It was there. It was underneath the surface. It took me time to articulate it. So in 2015, I walked away professionally from the rabbinate, and over the past 7 years have really been working on what's my why, not just in concept, but also literally writing my why. I have my why. I articulate it out loud to myself. I mean, when I'm by myself, I'll say it out loud at least once a day, sometimes twice a day, even up to 3 times a day. It's about 3 paragraphs. I won't bore you with it now, but it's actually going to go on my tombstone someday. I've communicated that I want this written down the back of my tombstone, and I'll share it with you. I've shared it before. I'll share it later. But it's concrete. I mean, literally, it'll be concrete at that time when it's carved into the stone. But it's concrete for me. It's not just a nice idea. And I think it hits home with a lot of business folks when I work with them, because I'll challenge them. I'll ask them to tell me their why of their company. I have yet to meet a successful business person who doesn't have a mission statement for his or her company. A mission, vision, purpose statement. In there's different nuances to that, but people get it when you talk about it from that context, and that's your why, your vision, kind of the overarching, and your purpose, your reason for being, and the mission, how you integrate it and implement it in your life. Business people get it when you talk about their company. Now I'll say to them, okay, Jane, okay, Joe, tell me your why. Well, what do you mean, my why? And they'll resort to platitudes most of the time. We all do. To be a good man or woman or husband or wife or father or mother or whatever it is, that's fine. But that's about as meaningful as Miss America, if that's still a thing. I guess it's still a thing. Standing on the world stage. And what does she always want? Right? She always wants world peace. I want world peace, but that's meaningless, right? Unless we can really own our part in world peace, right? What's my role? What's my contribution? How do I manifest that in a practical way? So, it's not enough to say I want to be a good person. What's your personal vision? What's your mission? What's your why? How does that wake you up in the morning and fuel you? And I think of it as your oxygen, right? Your why is your oxygen. It's your reason for being, your raison d'etre, your reason for being. To be able to articulate it, to say it on a moment's notice, on the drop of a dime. Can you articulate your why? If not, I challenge you, or I'd be honored to work with you. I work with people on discovering their why. And I can't tell you what it is. I won't write it for you. And I do believe you need to write it down. It's not enough to feel it and think about it. That's a starting point, but an end point is to write it down and then to articulate it over and over and over and over and over again, especially when the shit hits the fan. This is my, Catholics would have their prayers, and Jews would have their prayers, and Muslims have their prayers. And this is my prayer. This is B's personal prayer. And when I'm in a difficult situation, I'll find myself reiterating these words. These are going to be the words, God willing, I have the opportunity to have a deathbed setting, and I don't just keel over of a heart attack, working so hard. These are the words I want to go out on. That's what I mean. Again, I said it. What words would you put on your tombstone for generations to read after you're no longer physically walking this earth, but those words, that energy continues? That's your why. And so we need a why. He or she who has a why to live for can endure anyhow. And that's why you need the why, because when you come to those crossroads, when you come to those difficult decisions, you're a human being. You're going to waffle. You're going to waver. The best of them do. You need supports and structures put into place to catch you, to guide you, to turn to when you don't have your wits about you, when you don't have, right, when you're tired and you're exhausted. We need the go-to strategies and systems to turn to, not to start developing them there. It's too late at that moment. You have to have them ahead of time, right? Swimming out to sea with a life jacket on, not wanting a life jacket when you're out at sea or thinking about the life jacket, but having it. Because when the boat starts sinking, that life vest is your why. It will help you endure the how. And so really this is the work of the defiant spirit, because spirit isn't hocus pocus, and it doesn't have to be spiritual in the sense of woo woo. The defiant spirit is from Frankel's work, from logotherapy. Spirit is nous. Nous is just a fancy Greek word for noetic of essence, right? I could translate it as spirit, but then we have these hangups around spirit. So your essence, your core, your true self, right? In more of a kind of a psychological language, true self, the true you that was you, that is you, that will always be you. As I always use the example, pointing to my head, if you can't, if you're listening and you're not seeing this on video, I used to have more of this, more hair, a lot more hair. Now I have it, my face, my neck, but it used to be up here, and that's come and gone. Now, if I look in the mirror, sometimes I don't recognize me, right? Looking like more and more like an old man with this gray stuff. If I believe that was me, that would be somewhat of a tragedy, but it's not me, because the essence of me, of who I am, was, is, and will always be. And I know when I follow that thread back in time, that essence was the same little boy at 5, and the young man at 15, and the maturing man at 25, and now 50, and God willing at 75 and 100. There's a thread that is true me. There's a true you. That's your nous, as Frankel would call it. That's your essence, your spirit, your true self. And that's what we need for the defiant spirit, because that true self, right? And that's what we articulate with our why. This is who I am. This is why I'm here. This is the defiant power, as Frankel would call it, of my spirit, to live this life on my terms, not on circumstantial terms, right? Now, circumstances are always changing. I control nothing outside of me. Now, I live under the illusion and delusion that I do, but I don't. I can't control what's happening, driving down the street, oncoming traffic. I can do my part. I can stay in my lane, but people come swerving across the lanes, or, going down highway of life, so to speak, and you get bad news. A friend is diagnosed, or a loved one has been in an accident, or whatever. I don't control any of that. But all I control is my ability to respond. Responsibility, says Frankel, my ability to respond, to be responsible, able to respond, to choose my response to life's circumstances. Well, to do that, I got to find something in me that's unwavering, because in that moment, everything's wavering. Everything's in flux. Everything is in chaos, except that point within me, the nous, the noetic, the spirit, the true self, the true you. And that's your why. And so when you can come back to that why, you can become defiant of your circumstances. Your circumstances do not have to control you or define you or determine, right, your life and where you're going in your life. Great men and women throughout history have exemplified this. I think of one of Dr. Frankel's students, Edith Eger, who I mention quite often. She also has some wonderful books, The Choice and The Gift. Can't recommend them highly enough. She was also a survivor of the Holocaust. And she says one of her most famous ideas, and I've shared it many times because it's just that profound, is the difference between a victim and a survivor in the Holocaust, out of the Holocaust, in life, is that a victim has things done to him or her. And we're all victims at times. The question is do we take up residence in the victimhood, right? Do we take up residence there? Is that who we are? Does that become our permanent dwelling place, our reality? Or are we survivors? Because she says the difference is a victim says, why me? And we all are victims at times, and we need to say, why me? We need to lick our wounds and to go through that process. But we don't have to be victimized, as she says, right? To take up residence there, to have it happen to us again and again and again. We can become survivors. Victims say, why me? Survivors say, now what? Now what do I do? What is in my control? I don't care what the victimization has been to you, how horrible it's been, there's always something within us that we can hold on to, that's ours, that the robber, the rapist, the murderer, the thief, the fill in the blank, however we've been victimized, or something far less than that, but still painful. There's still something within us that they can't take. Only if, they can only take it if we give it to them. But otherwise, there's an untouchable part of you that no circumstance, no matter how horrific it might be, is yours and yours alone. And that's the defiant power of the human spirit. That's the nous, that's the true you. And that's what we need to draw upon when our circumstances, from great or small, pound on us or challenge us or try and steer us in a different direction, as circumstances tend to do. Circumstances don't usually conspire to take us to the top, to make us take us down a path of kind of flow and this natural success, right? All kinds of circumstances are pounding us. We've got to defy those circumstances to find our flow. Otherwise, we're just going to be in reaction, always adjusting course based on what's happening. That's why we go inside and find our why. That's what the why is. It's my internal compass. I've decided this is my direction. I've decided these are my values. I've decided, even if it costs me my life, this is what I'm committed to in this lifetime. Nothing and no one can deter me from living my why. No one, they may be able to stop me, right, from attaining what I want down the path of success, but they can't stop me from trying, from going in that direction. Right? That's up to me and me alone to stop, to change course. So finding your why, living your why. When I work with in the executive coaching role that I'm taking on more and more of, helping successful people who've had incredibly successful businesses and external lives find it within, because it's never enough. If it's an organizational, a business mission statement, we must make it our own. We must have our own. That business will change. How many people I've worked with who have started successful businesses or been accomplished professionals to have that either lost or maybe they sell it. So many people, especially men, at age 65, 70, 75, whenever it is they retire, have only defined themselves by the work of their hands, by the work of their profession. They don't know what to do with themselves. They don't know an identity beyond that. And they suffer greatly. I've done so many funerals, officiated at so many funerals for people, and men in particular, who went from on top of life, on top of their game, their business, they sell it, they move to Florida, and then they go downhill really fast. And then they disappear, they die. And I do the funeral. And you can just chart their descent from the time they sold their business, because their why was contingent upon their circumstances. But the great men and women who go from that moment of retirement to even bigger and better things, we got to get rid of that word retirement. I hate it. Because their why isn't contingent upon their profession. Their why is deeper than that, and they can translate it with their spouse and their grandkids or their hobbies or their passions, whatever it is. And so they take that same ethos, that same nous, that same spirit that drove them to success in their business, but it wasn't dependent upon their circumstances. It's in them. They own it. They know it. Now they can articulate it and endure that transition and translate it to other great endeavors and adventures and successes. And so helping you find your why. So if you haven't articulated your why, sit down and spend some time on that why, right? Write, W-R-I-T-E, write it down. Don't leave it as ephemeral, fleeting thoughts. Start to put pen to paper, or I'm very into Remarkable Pad. Feels like pen on paper, but take stylus to screen. I get no endorsement from them, but I do love this thing. And write your why. Write your mission statement, personal. Make it detailed. Make it real. Make it yours. You don't have to get it right on the first iteration. I've been reiterating this for 15 years now or so. So it's been a work in progress. It hasn't changed um, dramatically. I think I've refined it, I've changed it a little bit. But when I read my mission statement, my why, I can see how it applied when I was a rabbi, and now that I'm doing something else professionally, there's the thread that really hasn't changed. It's bigger than your circumstances, right? It can embody your circumstances. You can talk about your circumstances, but it can't be contingent upon them. That's the whole point. He who has a why to live for can endure anyhow. So the starting point of our journey together in the Defiant Spirit is to articulate what this word spirit means to you. These words, true self, authentic self, I don't care what you call them. Find it within you, articulate yours and yours alone. That's your why. If you have it, you can live. And if you don't, it's like you're as good as dead. My why to me is oxygen. My why to me is my reason for being here in this lifetime. It's not contingent upon any one thing or person. It encompasses lots of things and lots of people, but it's ultimately bigger than that, which is how it allows me to endure, to survive, and to thrive in any and all circumstances. And it will do the same for you. So that's what we're talking about on the Defiant Spirit. We're going to keep talking about it. I'm sure we'll come back to this topic of why, especially when I hear back from you all via email. You can email me at Baruch, Baruch, at mysoulcentered.org. And I will be happy to address any questions you have, and we can do a follow-up on this. I'm going to be probably doing some podcasts on some great people that I've gotten to meet over the past couple of years who've been working on their why, and we'll talk about their why. I'll share mine with you one of these days. We're going to then talk about from why to how. And for me, the Enneagram, I'll get into probably next podcast, is a way for me to translate my why into a how. So it doesn't just remain theoretical, and I have practical pathways through this thing called the Enneagram to translate it. And then now, how to live with greater consciousness, awareness, mindfulness, spirituality, whatever you want to call it, so that I can live a more meaningful, purposeful life. I can translate my why into my how and live my how right here, right now. So that's the Defiant Spirit. Thank you for kicking off with me into this new season. Stay tuned for the defiantspirit.org. Right now, that is just that just points you to mysoulcenter.org, where you can find more about all things logotherapy and me and the Enneagram, and how we might work together. But I'm almost done with a new website. I'm going to be also changing the colors on this Enneagram, going up to the next level, because it's just that important to me. It's that significant and central in my life. So I'd be honored and privileged to share it with you in any way, shape, or form I can. Again, feel free to reach out to me. Jump over to defiantspirit.org. And until the next time, defy your number and live your spirit. That's what this is all about. Take care.